All right, well, we're gonna get started here. So, we have a few housekeeping things to talk about as we get started, and mostly just to make sure that everybody understands, although I already put it in the email, so hopefully it all makes sense, but so I see Zoe, thanks for having your camera on. Perfect. I was gonna say the ones on Zoom, they have to have their camera on. So how this is going to work, so this is the 12-hour new agent course. So once you got your license, you're newly licensed. And Zoe, are you newly licensed as well? Okay, so once you get your real estate license, one of the things they told you is during the first 2 years, you have to take the 12-hour new agent course. So this will satisfy that. But also, even once you have passed your first 2 years, you're welcome to come back and take this again and get 12 hours of CE every 2 years if you want to do that. And so kind of the background on it. So I have been training in real estate now for too long, but since 2004. So I guess what that's coming up on, oh, that's like 19 years. So that's too long, like I said. So
I don't remember that.
that's okay. So anyway, I've been training in real estate for that long. Well, if you go back, they probably implemented this 12-hour new agent course about 10 years ago, where they said you needed to complete this within your first 2 years. And I was already doing a training program where what I would do is I would have agents come in, and we called it tech skills is what we called it. But we would have them come in and we would go through and teach them like how to do a CMA, which is what we're going to talk about today.
You don't mind, right?
No, that's fine. And then we would also teach like the buyer packet, the seller packet, and all those kinds of things of what we called tech skills. And the idea of the tech skills was to have the agents get taught the stuff they don't teach you in real estate school. Meaning when you went to real estate school, I don't know about you guys, unless it's changed, but for me, they didn't teach you how to sell real estate. They taught you how to pass the test, right? And so the idea of the tech skills was like, we got people coming out of real estate school into real estate. We need to teach them how now to fill out a contract, what really the real world application of some of the stuff. So I started to do that. And we would do these as tech skills, where we would do these classes, and we would usually do it once or twice a week, kind of similar to what we're doing now. And we would cover that information. Well, I had one agent right after the division implemented this 12-hour new agent course. I had this agent come back to a class that he had missed the week before. And he said to me, well, I had to go over to the board and take the 12-hour new agent course. And I don't know if it's changed how they do this now at the board today, but back then you had to pay, I think, if I remember right, it was $120 you had to pay to take the 12-hour new agent class. And so he goes to take the class, comes back the next week, and I say, so how was the 12-hour new agent class? And he said, it was really boring. And I said, why? And he said, because it was all the stuff you've already taught us. And that gave me then the thought, well, I should go get approved to just teach the 12-hour new agent course so that you don't have to then learn it here and then go over to the board and pay to go get the credit as well. So that's kind of the background of what we are trying to accomplish and do here. So a couple of things that to just hit on. So, and on the email that I sent out, which hopefully everybody got the email, but just in case, we'll make sure everyone knows. For the 12-hour new agent, you either get 12 hours of continuing education, you get the 12 hours of CE, or you'll end up with 0. And what I mean by that is, so there are 6 classes, today being the first, and as you hit all 6 of the classes, then I can give you the 12-hour new agent credit. Now, occasionally people will have scenarios that they run into where maybe they're not able to be here for one of the classes or whatever. And as long as you can catch it the next go around, which typically this will get taught about every 10 to 12 weeks, something like that, as we come up on it. As long as you'll catch it the next go around, then you can still get the CE credit. So just so that you know on that, but just as a reminder, and then for you guys on Zoom, you guys are doing great, but you have to have your camera on and be in front of the camera. at all times if you end up doing it on Zoom in order for me to give you the credit as well. So so for you guys that are on Zoom, if you will put in first and last name and then also your license number into the chat box. So if you guys will put first and last name and license number in the chat box, so that I have that information. So every time we do the class, so we'll do these today, Thursday, the next week, Tuesday, Thursday, the next week, Tuesday, Thursday. And once you have hit all 6 of the classes, then I give you credit, but I only need your license number really once. So if you'll just write it down one time as you sign in, and for you guys on Zoom, throw it in the chat box, just your license number the one time. But also then put in the license number, or excuse me, your last name, how it appears on your real estate license, because that's how I have to record it. So, and I'm really annoyed because there's some rain hitting the windows, and I just washed my car this morning. So I'm like, oh. Anyway, okay. All right. So
just give me this.
okay, no, you're good. So I don't know, any questions before we get going? And for you guys on Zoom, feel free to unmute anytime that you have a question or a comment. Okay. Trying to think if there's anything else to tell you before we get started.
What class is that today?
CMA.
CMA.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about CMA. All right, so let's jump into it then. So here's what we're going to do is, as I mentioned, a lot of this stuff was stuff that I've been teaching for a lot of years, but then when I went and got approval from the division to have it count as 12 hours of CE, the other thing that they include as part of that, there were some pieces that I wasn't covering that we are required now to cover. So we're going to start with one of those right now. And I'll typically pause throughout as I'm teaching you to say, okay, now this is something the division wants to make sure you understand. And so they've incorporated it and said that I have to teach part of that. So did you have a question, Lisa, or you just, you're,
That's my license number.
that's okay, your hand was up. So I was just like, if you had a question, I want to answer. Okay, so we're going to start with that. So one of the things that they want us to cover and to talk about in terms of doing CMAs is what is the difference. And so this part I want you guys to be very interactive on. So let's talk, and you same with you guys on Zoom. If you will unmute and talk with us. What is the difference between a CMA and an appraisal? So what would you say the difference is between a CMA and an appraisal?
What I've learned here is you don't do adjustments.
Okay. So now, what Lisa's saying is that we don't do adjustments, which probably a better way, and she said you, I'm assuming you meant me.
Well, that's the only class I.
Okay, good. Yeah. So because right. So part of with that, what I want to say is I don't do adjustments. That doesn't mean you can't. That doesn't mean you shouldn't, whatever. But yeah, I'll show you as we go through and do it that for me, I don't do it similar to an appraiser where I'm going to make adjustments for you know how many bedrooms and baths but just know you can. Though that ability is there through CMA programs and stuff that you can use. I just typically don't personally do a whole lot of adjustments, and I'll show you what I mean as we get into it. So, okay, good. What else would you say is the difference between a CMA and an appraisal?
If I understood right, a CMA is more like we are doing an estimate, and an appraisal, I think there is more tools that they use systematically that differs from the CMA.
Okay. Okay, good. So yeah, so the CMA is going to be more of our estimation versus she's saying the appraiser, which kind of goes back to the adjustments, is taking a more analytical approach, which I would say we still are taking an analytical approach, but maybe not as much. So yeah, good. Okay, Lisa.
An appraisal, their license is determined. For an appraiser, appraisal.
Okay, good. So an
They're
appraiser
licensed.
has to get licensed in order to do an
So
appraisal.
many things are determined for that appraised value, even though it's an estimate of value. They're licensed to determine that value, where our license is not.
Okay.
Determined on that value.
Okay, good. So they're licensed to do it versus we aren't. Okay, good. We'll come back to that in a
That's
second.
not our area of expertise.
Okay. Good. Any other thoughts? Zoom, you guys have any thoughts? All right, no worries. Okay, so now the next question then. Which is going to be more, what's the word I want to use?
Home in.
No, more accurate, maybe.
Appraisal.
Okay, so an appraiser, why?
Because I feel like they actually go in and they find things that could potentially be wrong with the house that would cause for adjustments or
Okay,
the value.
okay, good. So Jessica's saying that it's the appraiser's typically going to be more accurate because they're going in and doing a little bit more maybe research and they're looking a little closer than we do. Okay, good. Any other thoughts?
What was the question again?
Which is more accurate, the appraisal or a CMA?
I think what can be us.
Okay, good. I like that answer.
What can be, I mean, depending on how through we go through comparables and everything else that might affect the price, I think. What can be?
Okay, good. Actually, I like that answer. That's probably is the correct answer, as they both can be. Good. So here's what I would say. For me personally, though, I usually like to think about it this way. So we're going to talk for a minute about how an appraiser goes about doing the appraisal and why, in my opinion, I say that I kind of feel like actually that we as agents typically are going to do a more accurate, and I use that term loosely, but you know, that it's more accurate from us. Typically, the way that an appraiser is going to do an appraisal is if, let's say that, we'll do it here. Let's say that this is today, and they're going to look back in time, typically how far?
An appraiser,
Yes.
you have to start with the valuation date.
Okay. So, but when they're going to go get comparables,
Isn't it like 30 days?
then they're going to go back in time.
Well, you have to have a valuation date. If that's today, it's today, and that's the sale you're gonna look at.
Okay.
If it's 6 months ago, then that's your valuation date, and those are the sales you're gonna look at.
Okay. So if we're doing it as an appraiser and I'm trying to figure out today what it's worth, how far back in time though, they're going to go get comparables. But if I understand what you're saying they have to find comparables that sold today.
As close to today as they can.
Okay, good. So I like that better. So as close to today, but how far back will they go before they have to justify it?
Their circle of reach
Okay,
is as far back as their circle of reach will allow them. For instance, if you're doing a monster up on the point of wherever.
that just
You're
fell
not-
off the point of wherever. Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? It's harder.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I like what Lisa's saying. And that's part of the thing is, in fact, let me pause for a minute and say this. When I got my real estate license, I came into real estate with the idea of well, making a ton of money. But when it came time to valuing properties, I wanted it to be a scientific approach. I wanted it to be a scenario where you just plug in the information and then the computer spits out an answer and says, this is how much the house is worth. And I wanted that to actually be accurate. And so I would try to approach it that way, and I would get very frustrated because here's the thing that I want to make sure you guys understand. Doing a CMA is more of an art than it is a science. So think of doing a CMA as being an art. It is not a science. If it were a science, we could just say, okay, the house is located in this area. It's got this many square feet, this many beds, baths, and it would spit out, this is how much the house would sell for. And then we would put the home on the market and it would sell for exactly that amount. But that's not what happens. And so there are other things that factor into it, such as, let me give you a quick example. So I bought a home. I used to do a lot of foreclosure properties, so I would help the banks sell the homes after they had foreclosed on them. And occasionally, this goes back a long time ago, but back then what would happen, and this one particular bank that I worked with would call me up and say, how much do you think this house is worth? I would fill out somewhat of a, it's called a BPO, a broker price opinion. But
Right there, is that okay?
yeah, I can get, you can slide the table over.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just thought, yeah, that, I just like,
You what?
I thought like.
You're a trendsetter. Yeah. Okay, so this bank would send me over, and I would do this BPO or broker price opinion, where we would fill it out somewhat like an appraisal, but not like near to the extent that it was. And I would fill out this broker price opinion, send it back to the bank, and then the bank would typically list the home for whatever price I filled out like I didn't even have to send them copies of the comparables. You just filled out the form and sent it in. They would call me up and say, okay, we want you to sell the property and sell it for X amount of dollars. Well, I had this property that was down on about 9th South and 9th East in Salt Lake. And we had put it on the market, and I can't remember what the price was exactly, but we put it on the market at this whatever price it was. And we had a buyer come through that was somewhat interested and called me one day and said, hey, we noticed that there was a fire down in the crawl space of the house. And were you aware of that? And I said, well, no, it's a foreclosure. I didn't go in the crawl space. So no, I wasn't aware of it. They said, yeah. So I go down there and I look, and I could see one of the one of the floor joists that was down there. You could tell that it had been, somebody had lit it on fire, but it also looked like maybe it was a kid playing around and hurried and like put it out before it did too much damage. But the fact is, we now are going to have to disclose that, right? So I call up the bank and say, hey, we got this, and here's what we found. And they said, send us pictures. And I took pictures and sent it to them. And they called me back then and said, okay, we want to list the home for X dollars. Now, keep in mind what the reason I'm telling you this story. In fact, I'm somewhat reminding myself. I was like going, why am I telling them this story? But I remember now. So the reason is around how just it's an art, not a science. And so the bank calls me up and says, we're going to reduce the price because of that to basically make it a fire sale. They didn't really say that, but it's kind of we're going to sell this for really cheap because of that. Well, I had a friend of mine that was a contractor come look at that beam that had been lit on fire, basically. And he looked at it and said, really, it's fine. It's structurally still sound, but here's what we would do to make other people feel safe with it. And so he told me what it would do. Well, the bank comes back and tells me we're going to list the home for X price. And I was like, well, that's a good deal. And especially based on, it's not like you had to tear the whole house down, but that's basically how they were pricing it. So I called up the bank and said, hey, can I buy the house? And they said, well, yeah, if you want to buy it, you can buy it. And I said, great, here's my cash offer, and gave them the offer, got the house, and then went through and fixed it up. Now, so when I had done my CMA on it, I had run the numbers and came up with a price that I thought we could sell the house for. So we go through, we fix it up. It's all, we put in new kitchen, carpet, paint, it looks nice. It's updated, all that. Put it on the market. And after we had put it on the market, well, actually, right before I put it on the market, I was like, man, I actually think I could sell this for a lot more than what I did my CMA for. And so I had listed it, I want to say like 40,000 higher than what I thought initially I could sell it for. And so I put it on the market at that higher price, and I started getting tons and tons of showings, tons and tons of people coming and looking at it. And I was like, wow, I might even sell it for even more than that. Well, everybody would look at it and then I was never getting any offers. They would look at it, never get an offer, look at it, never get an offer. Well, I started trying to figure out, well, why is it, what's not working on it? And I would call the agents to get feedback of, what did your people think about it? And they would come back and tell me this is, they liked it, but just, they just weren't sure or whatever. So one day I'm standing in the property because I had gone out there and was like, I got to figure out what is it that is turning people off from the property? Because I was like, we did a good job of updating it and all those kinds of things. So I'm standing there in the family room of the property, and it had some windows, not quite like what we've got right here, a bank like this, but probably about the same size of maybe two of those windows. And I'm standing there just like looking around at the house going, what, why is this property not selling? And as I'm trying to figure it out, I look up and right outside the window across the street is a power substation. And all of a sudden I went, oh, I think I know now why people are coming. They like the house. They had nothing negative to say about the house, but every one of them was standing there looking around, trying to, get a feel for the neighborhood. And right across the street is this power substation. So here's the point. And this is where really two things that I'm driving the point home to. One is this is more of an art than a science, meaning the art part of doing a CMA, you would look at that and go, okay, there's a power substation across the street. That's probably going to be a turnoff to some people. Therefore, that's going to decrease what the home's worth. But an appraiser doing an appraisal is probably not necessarily, I guess it depends on the appraiser, but not necessarily going to take away on the value for that.
So, somewhere I heard that when you have that kind of situation, that the house is already worth less an amount. I don't remember if it was 10 or 20 or something like that.
I don't know.
I heard it somewhere.
Okay.
That to start with, you are minus that because of those kind of situations.
Yeah.
And I would like to remember how much is that, because
I would say if you're saying between 10 and 20, I would say it's probably 20.
20.
Yeah.
Because this I had that situation with two properties. One was same like you, nothing wrong with the house, but in the backyard there was some kind of center where they were caring for people, and that looked like a junkyard.
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many things all over the place. Of course, when people opened their window, that was a big turn off.
Yep.
So that was one, and then the other one was in the back of a busy highway.
Yeah.
So those two things, and there's nothing really wrong with the house, but those two things were turning people off.
Yep. Exactly.
I don't think you can arbitrarily apply a percentage. You should turn to the market and
Right.
see how that's impacting other sales.
Correct. That's why I'm like, if you're asking me between 10 and 20, I'd probably say 20, but I think that's a good point, is it really kind of just depends. It depends on how, if your house is close to the freeway, it probably depends on how close it is to the freeway on if that's,
That's the thing.
So-
For that highway, they were just like a couple of houses
Yeah.
that were impacted by that.
right.
The other ones weren't.
Yeah.
And somewhere in one of the teams that are here in Century 21, I heard that suggestion that when that kind of thing is there, you start already
Yeah.
at loss.
Yeah, which I would say that is correct, is you already do have to start with, it's gonna be worth less than if it was not backed up to that. So, yeah, and then I'll give you another story here real quick of why, again, to me, I feel like really we do a better job of valuing properties as far as putting one on the market to get it sold than what an appraiser does. So I hope it doesn't come across that I'm beating up on appraisers, because I'm not trying to, but let me give you this other quick example. So I have a neighbor that lives up the street from me that is an appraiser. He's also now a real estate agent as well. But when I'm telling you this story, he was just an appraiser. And I got a call from a neighbor of mine that lived just up the street from me, but probably, half a mile up the street kind of a thing. And maybe not that far, but quarter mile. and calls me up and says, hey, my mom's passed away and we need to sell her house. Can you help me? And I said, sure. So I went and met him. The home was just off of Atherton Drive in Taylorsville, right by where the Four Lakes Golf Course is. And I went and met him out there, and we're looking at the house and he's showing it to me. Well, she had had the home built in, I want to say it was 2000 was the year built. And when she built it, she was already elderly. And so she built this house without a basement because she's just like, I don't never going to use it. Let's just not even put a basement in. So just slab on grade. Well, when I went out there to look at it and he told me there's no basement, I was like immediately, okay, that's going to make the home worth significantly less. One, because of the square footage you're losing, but two is most people are going to want a basement. They don't want just a one level. Now, are there people that do? Sure. But for the general rule, that's going to be harder to value. Well, as we're looking at it, he says to me also, I don't know if you noticed as we were walking around the house, you know, he said, I don't even know if the blinds were open or not, but similar to what you're talking about, Luz, is he says right outside of the backyard of this house is a mobile home park. So the backyard neighbor is a mobile home park. Is that going to affect the value? So again, I said, okay, let me go and put together my comps. I go back to the office and I just start looking for homes that were built since 2000, and I don't remember what year this was. It was probably 2006 or 8. Well, it probably wasn't 8 yet. Maybe, I don't know, could have been somewhere around there. So I'm trying to find some comparables. Well, in that area, how many homes do you think there are that were built since 2000 that didn't have a basement? Yeah, essentially none. Is, if I remember right, I couldn't really find any. So I'm doing this same thing we were talking about here is, you know, you're going to start with today and try to get it as close to this as possible. So typically on an appraisal, they want to be somewhere within 90 days is really kind of where they want to be. They can go back to 6 months, but as Lisa said, it really kind of depends on the property and the location. If it's humongous property, you might have to go further back in time, or you might have to go a greater distance. And again, it comes back to this is an art, not a science. I wish it was a science. I wish it was, but it's not. So they, I finally kind of just do some extrapolating to, is that the right word? Is that a word? Extrapolate, I guess is the right word, right? So I'm trying to figure out, okay, homes that have about the same square footage on the main, what are they worth? And what do I estimate? Probably it's worth not having a basement. And I'm totally just trying to ballpark and guess it. Well, I land on that. I figure the home will probably sell at 185,000. Okay. And so I call up my neighbor and I say, okay, based on what I'm seeing, I think it'll probably sell for 185,000. And he says, oh, wow. Well, the guy up that lives between my house and so my house is here, his house is here. Our friend that's an appraiser's house is in between. And he says, according to his appraisal, he came up with 217,000. So almost what, $30,000 more than what I thought the house was worth. And I said, well, could you get me a copy of the appraisal so that I can see what he used? Because to some extent, I was like, I know how hard of a time I had finding comparables. And at that point, I'm like, he's an appraiser, so he should know better than me. Let's see what he has. So he sends me over the appraisal. And when I look at the appraisal, what I notice is the appraisal, he used comparables in Sandy. So you got Atherton Drive in Taylorsville and Sandy.
Wow.
Are those comparable?
Not really.
No. And so I called up my neighbor whose mom's house this was, and I was like, hey, so I'm going to have to talk to him to find out what he was thinking. But I said, he's using homes that are not comparable. And again, the fact that you got a mobile home park right in her backyard, essentially, I was like, that's just going to be something that's going to turn off most buyers.
Which did you consider the worst obsolescence, the no basement or the trailer park?
That's a good question. I don't know which I would say.
Did you look for comparables or whatever by the trailer park also?
Well, so yeah, so good question. So actually the way that this street worked basically was I can't remember what street this is. Here's Atherton Drive. It came off here and here's Four Lakes Golf Course is all right here. It was just this, like the trailer parks here. They built this street here, which is this was a gated subdivision and just one street, one cul-de-sac basically, but somewhat of a long cul-de-sac. And so, yeah, trying to use comparables from within there was number one. I think she was the only Rambler that was in there, but then to add to it, no basement. The rest of them, I can't remember for sure. I could be wrong. Some of them might have been Ramblers, but they all had basements. So it made it very difficult though, because her house was right here backing up to the.
So when you say no basement, was that there's no space for basement or wasn't unfinished?
There
Or
was
there was
no
just
basement,
basement.
nothing. Yeah, just the cement, it's called slab on grade. So it was just a slab of cement on top of the dirt and then the house built.
Okay, so no space, it wasn't.
There was
Okay.
no basement.
All
Yep.
right.
Yep, so not unfinished, just no basement.
No basement.
Yeah. So anyway, I call up the appraiser and said, help me understand, why did you use comparables in Sandy? And he said, well, because there aren't any homes that were built that year that without basements, and I had to go that far away. And I said, well, that's great, except for that you didn't adjust enough for Sandy and Taylorsville and the mobile home park and all that kind of stuff. And now here's the thing though. It's time now for the seller to list his mom's house. What price do you think he wants to list the house at?
Oh, wow.
The-
Bigger.
the-
217,000.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, we'll try it. And I explained our pricing strategy, which is a whole different class. But I explained the pricing strategy and he says, okay, let's do that. So we listed at 217,000 and we go 3 weeks with no showings. So I said, okay, this isn't working. And so we reduced it. We got it down to like 199, I think, or something. And we got an offer. It might have been 195.
You
but
reduced it more than one time, because
I want to say we did it twice. Yeah, I should look it up, but
Okay,
anyway, I reduce it. We finally get an offer and it sells for about 190. So I thought 185, it sells for 190. So that's my feather that I put in my cap, that we're better than an appraiser. I'm just kidding. All right. Okay. So now with that, let's now talk about how to go about doing this thing. Okay. So I told you we had to start with talking about what's the difference between CMA and an appraisal, and now you kind of, all right. So if I have a house here, and we already kind of talked about the time and stuff, but typically an appraiser is going to typically go a radius from the house. And usually I just like to say, if you kind of just think of it, and again, this is going to vary, what Lisa said, depending on the size of the house, the style of the house, all that kind of stuff. It's going to vary how far you go, which again, you're going to hear me say this over and over and over and over and over again, is doing a CMA is more of an art than it is a science. Okay. So they're typically though going to want to try to stay within a reasonable area. And I usually just say a mile. But again, depending on how rural the house is, all that kind of stuff, it could vary how big it is, everything. Okay. But what other things are they going to do to look at? So I'm going to say date, because we already talked about that. Is it they want to find them as close to today as possible. But what else are they going to be looking at in doing their appraisal? Because we want to approach our CMA from that same standpoint, because we're going to be end up dealing with an appraiser on this. Okay. So what else are we going to be looking at?
Square footage.
Okay, good.
Age, acreage, square footage, style,
So hang on, let me get this down. So age, good.
acreage,
Acreage,
square footage,
square footage.
location.
Okay, so location we've got there.
Style,
Okay, good.
home. Style.
So here's what I would say is from here, for me, this is kind of the main thing that I'm typically going to be looking at is these.
But you have to make note of what we just talked about, and that's external obsolescence, if there is any.
Sure, yeah, so but I would say just kind of for a basics of getting started, this is pretty much what I'm gonna use to get started. Now, in addition to that, we could continue on and say beds, baths. You know, we could kind of get deeper into the weeds, but for me, when I'm doing this, I'm typically going to approach it from the standpoint, and we're going to do one, so I'll show you exactly what this looks like. But typically, I want to start with a home that's the same style, in the same general area, about the same square footage, about the same lot size, same age, and trying to think of and I guess, you know, within a reasonable time frame. So now here's the key thing, though. Don't get so caught up in doing this to where it's like, I got to get it perfect. Instead, what you want to do when you're doing a CMA is you want to approach it from the standpoint of think like a buyer. See, most of the time, and part of where I would say the difference between a CMA and an appraisal is the appraisal is done for who? Who pays for? Let me rephrase that. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, let me rephrase it. Who is the appraisal for?
Bank.
The bank. Why?
Usually.
Yeah, typically it's the bank.
So that they don't like overfund for.
Good.
The value of the.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the bank is going to give money to the buyer to get this house. They want to know, in the event you don't make payments and I have to go get it back, am I going to get my money back? So just keep in mind, banks want to get the money back. So the appraisal is done for the bank, paid for by the buyer. So the buyer pays for it for the bank. So keep in mind that those pieces is what falls into this. So when typically an appraiser is doing an appraisal, they're approaching it more from that standpoint of, I'm just really trying to make sure the bank will be able to get their money back, is what they're doing. Not so much about, hey, what could we actually sell the house for? Okay. So just kind of keep that in mind. So now with that, we're going to jump into, let me get the screen down here. We're going to pull up the MLS and we're going to start working on doing a CMA.
I actually just got access to that today, so.
Awesome. That's great.
Or you did what?
I just got access to it this morning, yeah.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen for you guys on Zoom to be able to see. So hopefully you can see it. Okay. So get this turned on so you guys can see. All right. And then probably it'd be easier to see. The lights are off for you guys, right? Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna do a CMA on a property, and I'm gonna just walk you through the process I would go through doing it. Now, one of the other things I always want to highlight is there are probably as many ways to do a CMA as there are agents. So there's, again, because it's an art, not a science. So just keep in mind that I'm going to show you how I do it, but that doesn't mean it's the way to do it. It's just how I do it. And if we had somebody else come teach the class, they might do it slightly different, but we should come up with about the same number. Okay, so we should be in kind of the same ballpark. And here's what I'm thinking is I'm going to walk you guys through it, but you guys are going to tell me what you think the value is. Okay, so we're going to assume that we have a house that we're going to do a CMA on. And actually, here's the funny thing is my first home that I owned is the one that I've always done this, used it for this class. I've always used it for this class. But I noticed that it sold yesterday. So I was like, if we do a CMA on it, it's gonna be like, you guys will be like, well, here's what it's worth because it just sold for that yesterday. So we're actually gonna do a different house than that one, but anyway, it was just kind of funny. When I pulled it up today, I was like, oh, great, it just closed yesterday, so that kind of screws up this class, but all right. So, but we'll see, we'll still go through and do the same concept and the same.
How come
kind
you
of-
like that one so much?
How, well, yeah, good question. Why do I like it so much? The reason is because every time I do the CMA, I'm like kicking myself of why did I ever sell that house? Because I sold it for 140 and well, I'll tell you later what it sold for, because we're gonna use the same style of a house and stuff, and we'll just see what you guys think. So
So why do you make yourself suffer? Just pick something different.
I know I should pick something different, but I don't know, it's fun.
Good thing is all that.
Yeah, okay, so what we're gonna use is a house that is out off of, we're just gonna say that the property we're using is a property off of 5600 west and 6200 south, okay? It's a multi-level home with 1800 square feet, well, I printed it off. Here, let's see. So it's 1810 square feet. There are 3 bedrooms, 1 full bath, 1 3. Well, in fact, let me just show you. Here's what I typically do. If I'm going to be starting a CMA, so we're going to assume that we just got a call from these people and said, we want to sell our house. And so we are going to go out, take a look at it, and then we're going to go back to the office and do a CMA. So let's assume we went out and looked at it. And let's just say the condition, it was just average, not updated, just kind of an average condition home built in the mid-90s. Okay. So what I would do then is, for me, the first thing I'm going to do is I like to use the full search when I'm doing my CMA. And then I usually start by just doing a search to see, has this home ever been on the market before? And again, this is something probably most agents don't do. I don't know if maybe they do or don't, but I'm just showing you how I like to do it. Doesn't mean it's the right way, just how I like it. So I usually come down here to this house number. And I'm gonna put in the house number of this property, 5620. And then I'm just gonna see how many are there. Well, there's 16 matches, and so I have no criteria selected other than the house number. So I'm gonna click view results. It brings up these properties, and then I'm just gonna scan down to find the one that's on Walnut View Circle here, okay? So I click on this, I pull it up and say, okay, so here's our subject property. And again, for me, I like to just go click on the history, and that's the main reason I do this is twofold. One is I like to just look at the history to see kind of what's gone on with it. So the home was on the market in 1999, but it didn't sell, it expired, came back on in 2008, and sold for 175,000.
So,
Okay.
oh, sorry,
Yes.
what was the first thing you did before you went all of that?
Before this even?
Yeah.
Oh.
So you put the house number, you said?
Yeah, I just put in the house number back here. On the search. I just scrolled down here to house number, put in the house number. Then there's 16 properties that match that house number, so I did view results.
Okay, so
What
maybe
was the house number?
Yeah,
though?
what was it?
Sorry.
5620.
Okay, 56.
56. Wait.
Yep.
And then what else do you do?
Just click through.
Then I just once I saw that there were 16 matches,
Okay.
then I clicked on view results.
Okay, so,
Okay,
but you've got. Oops, you don't have any matches.
yeah, I don't have any matches, how come?
Well, let's see.
What am I doing wrong? I'm doing
Go up to the top
And how did you get the like house
because you have
number?
it active.
So what?
How did I get it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because so again, we're assuming this person called me and said, I want to
Oh,
sell my
okay.
house, so they
So,
gave me their
What
address.
do you put in? I should
Nothing.
put back-
Nothing.
Oh, I don't put anything?
Yeah, don't have anything, and then
Yeah,
you should have 16 minutes. So click the X, wait, you can put the X to get rid of it,
Oh,
and then
all right.
click over into something else here, just to make sure. that- So now you have 16.
Okay,
Okay.
Okay,
You're doing-
so then you're gonna click on the view results.
Okay.
okay,
Then I'm gonna come down here to I just find. You'll see there's two of them here for Walnut View Circle. It doesn't matter which one you select. I just click one of them. And then from there, I want to get the history, and the one at the top here, that this one doesn't have a link, so that's the one I'm on, is the most recent. So I just wanted, for me, I just like to click on the pictures to get a feel for, you know, what condition is the property in.
Are we still on your old house?
No, this is not it. This is a different one. I didn't use mine because it just sold yesterday, so. Wouldn't have done us a whole lot of good to do. I mean, I guess we could still do it. It would just tell us. This essentially is the same thing.
Are they both the same house though? These two that are like
Yes.
the same?
Yeah, one of them looks like maybe it's just had some updates done to it, so. All right, so let's just assume on this property, what would you say the condition is of this scale of 1 to 10?
I would say it's fair, good.
I'd say it's
Not bad.
good, except for that blue paint.
Except what the blue page? Yeah.
Blue paint.
So it looks like they've updated, you know, it's got. Countertop cabinets maybe updated a little. So, okay, so what we're looking for then is we're gonna keep that in mind as in consideration as we go through this, okay? So- so-
Needed to be painted.
The what? Deck, yeah, I did notice that too. Okay, so which, by the way, on the deck needing to be painted would be a great thing for us to say. To the seller is, here's something you're gonna need to do, but, okay, so come back to, we're gonna do the CMA. So here's what we wanna do. So for me, from here, I'm gonna start with, I'm just gonna copy this MLS number. And I'll show you why here in a second. And then I'm gonna go back to my full search. And I'm gonna clear all the search criteria. So you always want to start with clearing that search criteria. Now, keep in mind, what we want to do is we want to find comparable homes that have sold in the same area, same style, and get as close to that property as we can. Okay. So I'm going to start with and say, okay, I want to get under status, I want solds. I only want to see sold properties. And I'm going to then go to view map. And from the view map, if you you could do any of the, you can either jump to the property if you wanted to draw your own map, but I usually use this radius tool to start with.
Step out for 1 second. My mom's in the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
So I just.
Yeah, you're good. So I'm gonna click on this radius tool here.
So what images we ended up using?
It doesn't matter which one, either of them will work.
Okay, because the one that I think you were using for some reason doesn't show a picture.
But it doesn't matter.
It doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
no. Just any of the MLS numbers that are associated with the property, what we're gonna use it for is this right here. So I'm gonna click on radius tool. Then over here, it has set the radius. And the only reason I got the MLS number is because you can either type in this box right here, the address, or you can put in the MLS number. So, and any of the MLS numbers will work. So I'm gonna just start with, for me, think of it this way, when you're doing a CMA, you can either start closer in or you can start farther away, whatever you want to do. For me, again, like I said, I just typically am going to do 1 mile is just kind of my default that I always do. Okay,
So what criteria did you choose for the status?
what criteria for what?
In here, what did you find?
Just
that- Just so,
Yeah,
okay.
And if you get too many, you go smaller.
yeah. So I'm just gonna click on set criteria. So you can see it's zooming in, and right now, yeah, there's a ton there, but we also haven't put on a whole lot of information yet. So I'm gonna now hide the map. So there's 230 to choose from that have sold within the last, it defaulted to a year, which I don't really want to go back that far. So, so we're gonna now try to narrow this down a bit, okay? So I'm gonna come down here and go to number of days back, and I'm gonna say, for me, again, this is where, keep in mind, it's an art, not a science. And so for me, I typically on this number of days back, I'm usually going to, on the number of days back, either do, for me, either I start with 90 or 120. And it kind of just depends on, I guess I would say, my first initial just thought of like, how many, do I think there's going to be a lot of them for sale? If so, I'm going to do 90 days. If I think there might not be, I'm probably going to do 120. If I really thought there was a lot, I might start with 60, but that's kind of the idea of this is an art, not a science. So I'm going to just say number of days back, I'm going to go with, let's do 90 and see what we get, okay? So I click there, that dropped it down to 57, okay, that which is fine. The other things we still need to put in is the style. So the style of home, this one was a tri-level, multi-level. So I'm going to come down here to tri-level, multi-level, select that and click out of there. So that's brought us down to 20. So far what we've put in there is I've got a mile radius. We've got homes that have sold in the last 90 days that are tri-level, multi-level homes. So next I'm going to go in and say, well, let's see what happens if we put in the square footage to narrow that down. So what do you think we should use? Actually, let's do year build since that's here first. So the year build on this shows us 1993. What do you think we should put in for a range for the year build?
Years, you're still okay.
What's that?
10 years and you'll still probably.
Okay, so again, on this, here's how I like to think of it. And again, doesn't mean it's right, it's just how I do it. For me, the newer the home, the smaller the range. The older the home, the bigger the range. So on this, yeah, 10 years is probably great. So we'll say 1983 to 2000. And actually for me, again, this is back to where art, not a science. For me, I'm going to actually cut it off at 1999 instead of 2003. And my reasoning for that is that I just feel like the year 2000 is potentially going to be, and maybe it's not as much anymore, but for a long time, I felt like people would come in and say, I want a home built 2000 or newer. And maybe we're far enough away that that's not the case anymore, but.
Wouldn't it be 1993 if it's 10 years?
What do you mean?
Isn't that what you were just saying, like?
The year build of this one was 1993. So I went to
93 or 83?
83.
Okay, so I thought it would be to 1993, because that's 10 years. Is
No.
that what we were just saying?
Well, so I'm saying I'll typically do a 10-year range
okay,
kind
okay.
of a thing from, oh, I see what you're saying. Sorry. Yeah, I didn't explain that very well. I will go a range of maybe 10 years back and forward.
Oh, okay, okay.
So really it'd be 20 years, I
Okay,
guess,
okay.
but on this one. And I might not even actually, I might only do 5. So maybe we would do 1988
Okay,
or something.
okay.
I know that probably doesn't help you much, huh? I'm like, but this is where I'm like, it's an art, not a science,
Yeah.
whatever. So I'm actually, the truth is for me, I'm less concerned about this 1983. Because I don't think we're gonna find a whole lot anyway, if I did 83 or 87.
Okay.
So, or 88, I don't think we're gonna get much of a difference, so that's why I just left it. But I do feel like, for me, again, this is just personal preference, cutting that off at 1999 is how I'm gonna do it.
Okay.
Now, so square footage. So the square footage on this one is 1,810. So what should we do on the low end? What should we do on the high end?
I'm not sure.
Okay, I probably am going to do 1,600 on the low end.
Okay,
And typically I would probably say 2,000 on the top end. But again, I feel like a buyer is going to be like, I want a home with at least 2,000 square feet. And this isn't going to fall into that This is where I was telling you, I like to think more like a buyer than a seller. I'm thinking about how is a buyer going to be out searching, and I want to find homes that are going to be comparable. And I just feel like a home with 1,800 square feet, and if we're comparing it to homes that are 2,010 square feet, we might be getting to where a buyer's like, well, no, I want 2,000. And if it's less than that, they wouldn't even consider it. So again, for me, this is just how I do it. I would throw in the 1999 again there. So now that brings us to 9 matches. That's probably pretty good. We could try to whittle that down a little bit more, but I'm okay with searching through 9. So from here, I'm gonna hit view results, which, by the way, this is being recorded and I will upload it to our YouTube channel, so if you want to go back and review. All right, so we've got 9 that are matching properties here. And so the next step for me in doing this is to now whittle that down from 9 properties to, 3 or 4. So what I would be doing next then is I'm gonna select all of these properties. Come here and I'm gonna go to the agent full report. And then from here, I really want to come down and just look at. Is this property comparable to ours? Now, we're not going to take the time to go through all of these, but I'm going to come down and just be looking at, okay, this one's got 3 bedrooms and 1 bath. Our subject property had 2 bedrooms and 1 bath. Close enough. This one doesn't have a bath on the main level. Ours has a half bath on the main level. The basement, ours has 1 bedroom and this one has a 3/4. Ours had 1 bedroom and a 3/4. So really the only difference between our property and this one is 1 extra bedroom and a half bath. So pretty good comparable. So the next thing I would be saying is, okay, let's look at the condition of this one on the inside. Would you say better, worse, or the same?
Looks
Better.
better.
Way better, right? Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna say, okay, but for me, I probably would say that might still be a good comparable to keep. Just because I'm like, that square footage and all that's good, it's just, this one's updated, ours isn't as updated, so ours probably gonna be worth a little less, but let's keep it. Okay, so next I would come down and do the same thing on this. This one's a 3 bedrooms and 1 3/4 bath up, ours is 3 bedrooms, 1 bath. Doesn't have the half that we have, has an extra bedroom, so 2 extra bedrooms, extra there, so. I feel like potentially a little bit nicer or more amenities or features. Let's look at the condition. What do you think condition of this one?
It's about
It's
comparable.
better, yeah.
Yeah, a little better, but not, somewhat similar, right?
I would say more similar than better.
Yeah,
You'd say what?
More similar than better.
Okay, good. So, okay, so that one is 485, so we'll keep that one too. Even though, again, in my mind, I'm saying, okay, that one had a full bath on the upstairs and a 3/4. So it had 2 bathrooms up there. I always feel like that's probably a little more desirable. This one's got a great sunset picture. But 2 bedrooms, like this one actually square footage is really close, maybe 100 less. Doesn't have the half bath, but everything else is about the same. And let's see the condition on this one. What do you think? Condition? Probably a little nicer, huh?
A little.
Okay. 455, so you get the concept, right? I would just be coming through and looking at this one here and saying, okay. This one's 3 bedrooms, has the half bath, so an extra bedroom upstairs and a extra bedroom down. Let's look at the condition.
No,
What?
that doesn't look as.
So not quite as nice,
No.
yeah.
okay? So interestingly, this one sold for 455 and so did this one.
Wow,
That we thought was nicer, so this one sold March 17th. This one sold April 20th, this is my old house right here, actually.
Oh, that one?
Yeah,
Hmm.
the one that sold yesterday. All right, how about this one here, sold for 455. Extra bathroom, nothing finished in the basement. I always
Features,
like to see the kitchen.
features are in that.
Kitchen's probably about the same, okay. So. This one goes to 450 now. Just quickly look at. Okay. This one 429 in April, just a few weeks ago. Pretty similar, has a full bath on the main instead of a half. Hakuna Matata. What do you think?
There's a reason has 429.
Okay. Here's a 445, a little bit older. All right, just to save time, we're just gonna kind of go, here's a 420, let's see what the condition this one is.
Yeah, except for the cabin.
Okay. All right. That was the last one. Okay, so based on that,
So Ross, question for you.
yes,
When you're looking at houses and all the years of experience that you have, what do you think is more relevant? Like, oh yes, we look at the age, but how about the condition or how upgraded? Because it could be
Hmm.
old, but have more upgrades than a newer one.
yeah, I would
So
say
what
that
we
the
think-
condition and the upgrades is probably more important than the age.
Than the age.
Hmm.
Because I was thinking the one with the elephant and again the same. After what I seen, they say that's a big, no.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so if you were having to give the seller a recommended list price. And so for you guys on Zoom, this, you gotta put it in the chat box or unmute, either one, I don't care. But everybody give me a value. What would be your recommended list price based on what we've looked at? Nobody wants to go first, but
I think
65.
460,
65.
but some of them are nicer, I feel like, than that one, and they went for a lot less, so.
I didn't think it was as nice as the 455.
okay, so what do we think?
Maybe 450.
Are we observing that the houses that were sold a little bit? What is that? Months back. Went for more than the ones right now?
Well, I mean, we can kind of see on here on some of those. So this is the sold date you're seeing there. But so the 424 sold for 455, but then there's also a April 5th that sold for 429. So
I say 450, and then if it doesn't sell, like, no offers, 445.
okay. What do you think, Lisa?
I think so too. It wasn't as nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Luz,
Wasn't as updated.
Well, same 440.
okay, Lindsay says 455. Zoe, what do you think? Looks like she's on the phone. All right. Well, what do we not know?
You don't know if he fixed up the deck. Was that the one with the bad deck?
Well, our subject property was, yeah.
Yeah.
But, so here's what I would say. So here's the ideal thing. What I would be doing if it were me is I would have gone through and spent more time than what we did right now on these properties to land on what are the 3 or the 4 that are the most similar, that would be the best comparable. And when I say best comparable, meaning size, condition, like all of that location, trying to figure out, which of those is going to be the most comparable. So, okay, but
And you absolutely would go with that value that was the best comp.
well, at this point, I would not be, for me, honestly, at this point, I would be saying, okay, I'm starting to get an idea of price. And where you guys are saying 460, it sounds like a lot, 455, 460, probably pretty good, but there's a couple more things I want to look at. So the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to come back here and I'm going to switch this sold using all the same information. I want to see backup or under contracts and see how many there are. So you can see by switching the status from sold to backup and under contract, I now see that there are 2 properties that match. So I click on the view results, it's going to bring up those 2. And then now I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm going to go look at these to say, okay, here's this one that's under contract at 453. A little bit different, actually. It's showing this tri-level or multi-level, but I bet that looks more like a split entry to me, but let's see. Which if it is, that'll be a good discussion point here. Yeah, it's a split entry.
And what do they have tri-level?
Yeah, they listed it as a tri-level, but it's not.
How come?
Oh, that's-
How come what?
Is they put it as tri-level?
Yeah, great question. So here's what, occasionally you'll see this happen, not a ton, but occasionally. Agents will list a property, sometimes agents will put a tri-level, multi-level and list it as a two-story. Because two-story sounds better than tri-level, multi-level, and tri-level, multi-level sounds better than split entry. So they'll list it.
What's so bad about the splitting?
What's bad about it? I don't know.
People don't like
People
them.
just don't like them
You
as
walk
much.
in the front door and you got a decision. to
Yeah.
make.
Right when you walk in the front door, you're either going up or down. And so just for whatever reason, they're not as desirable. So,
Really,
So-
the split entrance?
When you make your decision, does the proximity to your subject property come into play? at all?
yeah, sorry, on those solds, we probably should have paid a little bit better attention to how close.
Because,
So,
neighborhoods come into
yeah,
play.
so in fact, the one property that was on the same circle as our subject property, I for sure would have used that sold. I would have printed that one off for sure, because it was right in the same circle.
Not that this one over here wouldn't be subject to some external obsolescence, but the market may change a little bit over here. For the better, perhaps.
Sure.
For worse, perhaps.
Exactly.
So-
Yep, very true. Okay, so I may or may not keep this comparable just because it's really not as tri-level, multi-level.
But that one looks just worse than not to be mean, like than
Yeah,
far
that-
less, yeah.
yeah, so I may or may not keep it because there's only two, I would still keep it, but. Typically not, and this one, 425, look, at least the outside, like, looks pretty beat up, huh?
Yeah.
So let's
But
see what it looks like.
Would we even take into consideration the under contracts because they could fall through, right? We would only use
Well,
like
yeah,
the
and-
comparables.
So typically an appraiser is only gonna use sold.
Okay,
I like to use the backup or under contracts as well, because for me. What it's telling me, the whole purpose of all of this for me is to. Doing a CMA is an art, not a science. It's giving me the gut feel, I guess is the way to say it, for what I think the house will sell for. And I'm using all of this information, just kind of stacking it. And then gonna land on, here's kind of where I would recommend a list price. So this one at 425 is pretty beat up. I mean, you saw the photos, right?
My last comment, see, this one's in ochre shadows. Where's our subject?
Yeah, our subject is, I don't know
See,
what
our
the name is,
subject
but it's
is
not
better-
there. Yeah,
Is in a better neighborhood.
yeah, probably a somewhat better location than what this is. So, but I would probably actually, just based on those two comparables, I would probably print those off and take them just to show and say, yeah, this one's in ochre shadows, this is a little better area, your house is better condition. So we're probably gonna get more than 425 for sure because of that, right? And the other one was, what was the other?
Just for that alone.
Yeah, the second one was, or the first one here. Yeah, it's not too far away,
Some.
a little bit newer, but it's that, so I'm use it. Okay, so now the next thing, which really this is probably for me personally, the most important. Is I also want to look at the actives. How many homes are for sale right now that are similar, and what do you see? Zero. So what does that tell you?
They're selling.
It tells me, one, that they're selling, but two, is if a buyer is going out and looking for a home similar to what we've been talking about. In that area, and remember, we still have a 1 mile radius of this. There isn't one that exists. Yeah.
could we do it all in one search though, like click active, backup, or that's just confusing and we should do it separately?
No, that's a good question. You could do it that way. The only reason that I don't. The only reason I don't do it that way is. Just because, again, yes, the answer is yes, you could do you could put all of them in there. For me personally, I just like to segment it so that I know,
Which-
hey, I'm printing off these and here's the solds. And I'm, again, it's just, there's nothing wrong with doing them all. But for me, I like looking at it to go, okay, based on the solds, I feel like this is the price. Based on those under contracts, seeing that one at 425, I'm more leaning towards higher 455, 460. Seeing that there's nothing for sale, I kind of start to go a little bit like, maybe we could even go a little higher than 460. So,
Well, and then you can't deny that the true worth of a property is what it sells for.
correct.
That one bad trashy looking property in Oak Shadows,
Yeah.
if those people absolutely have to sell, it might not actually sell for more than 416.
Right.
We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, that's a good point. It went under contract at 425, but we don't know what it actually sold.
Which would not be reflective of our subject.
Correct. I just want to see, what would we have to do to get some more properties in here? I'm just gonna try to widen our search a little bit here to see why. Because I'm a little surprised actually that we don't have anything coming up. So let's go back to our, we get rid of. It's actually pretty good. That's interesting that there are no tri-level homes for sale in that area. There's one, if we get rid of style, there's only one home for sale active right now in that area. With about the same square footage. So here really is what, so here's a perfect example. They use this, here's loose, they listed it as a 2-story, this is not a 2-story, this is a tri-level multi.
Yeah.
So
So,
this actually would be a good comparable potentially, so it's listed at 480. And let's look at the condition.
so what is this telling me? It doesn't matter what it is, just find the style that people like more and just put it in there.
Well, you don't see it as often as what we just did, but it, from time to time, it drives me crazy. So if I'm ever not finding comparables, then I will start to think, well, did an agent list one as a 2-story when it's really a tri-level multi, and that's what we just
fix
fixed.
that tiny little section in the back that, oh, well, here's a little part that's just.
Yeah, it could be, I don't know. So here's the thing though. So this is where for me, on this particular property, if our seller even wanted to try 470, I probably would be okay saying, let's try it. And here's why. If somebody's going out and looking in this price range and they go look at, there's only the 2 houses that are for sale. If we listed this one, they're gonna go look at this one for 480, and then if you looked at the condition on this, ours is better condition.
Yeah.
So really, the fact that this exterior looks pretty decent, the back not so much, but when you get to the inside of the house, like look at the kitchen. Or
Mhm.
like it's pretty, number one, it's a small kitchen, like really small compared to what. I mean, not that the one we were looking at was big, but bigger than this. And cabinets still are old and dated and things, like to some extent, I would be willing to list ours at a little higher price. Only because this one will make us look better.
Mhm.
If this didn't exist or they reduce their price or whatever. So anyway, for me, I probably would be saying on this, like, I would want to be listing our subject property. I still feel like maybe 455, 460, what you guys were saying. But I think we could push it a little bit, and or maybe even get some competition coming in to buy it because of this one and the fact there's nothing else for sale.
So,
Did you say this is the sold?
No, this one's active.
so Ross, this is going to the point of being an art.
Yes.
It's kind of like playing cards. What hand do the other team, the other players have,
Well, it hasn't sold.
right?
Right.
Let's not get excited.
Yeah.
It hasn't
So
sold.
what,
Right.
it hasn't solved, but it's there. I mean, is there
Well,
like,
that's just it. It's if, like I said, if somebody's going out looking for a house under 500,000. They have basically with that amount of square footage and stuff within a 1 mile radius of where we were looking at, there's not much for sale. I mean, we could we could definitely, let me come back out and because this is probably something I really would do, is I would come back to the map. And I would get rid of this. And say, let's radius it and go 2 miles. And see if that picks up any more properties. But there's still only one within a 2 mile radius. That's the year build, square footage and all that. So there's just not a lot for sale still in our market. That's the challenge is so you could try to push the price range a little bit. But I mean, this 480's only been on the market 4 days, but it's gonna sit for a
It
while.
doesn't
So.
look like it's been updated a lot. The cabinetry. It's
Right.
No two-tone.
Right.
paint, nothing.
Right, so anyway, what I would be doing though, is I would then go through and print this off. So I would print it off 3 or 4 of the solds, the 2 under contracts and this 1 active. And then I would sit down with the seller and go through and show them, here's where things are at. I would probably tell them, your house is probably gonna sell around 455, 460, is probably gonna be the sales price. But if you wanted to start it at 460 or 465, let's try it and see, I would be okay with that, just because. Again, back to supply and demand, there's just no supply.
So I didn't think that.
That's right. Yeah, supply and demand is for me, that's like one of the biggest things I'm looking at is. How many choices do the buyers have? So what's the supply and what's the demand? So we can see there are 2 under contract right now, properties, and so. I would be willing to probably press it a little bit, but I wouldn't go to 480 and even probably 475. I'd go.
We were upgraders, but I was not considering that.
You didn't think about supply and demand, so anyway. Okay, a little bit shorter of a class today, but any questions?
Are there like?
Oh,
more
I think I lost
classes?
Zoom. Did I lose you guys on Zoom?
No, I'm still here.
Okay, cool.
I don't know. I can only see your screen that you shared and then the screen. Oh, there's my face. That's
There we go,
close.
yeah. All right. Cool, okay, so next class will be Thursday, so Thursday we will start at 11 again, and I think it's the rep sheet, so it's rep sheet with Russ, so we're gonna go through and talk about the real estate purchase contract. So there are 2, just make sure you guys know too, there's 2 rep sheet classes. One is the rep sheet with Russ, the other one's rep sheet workshop. The workshop is more of like, how do you fill it out? What we're gonna do on Thursday this week will be me really just talking about, here's kind of the main things you need to know about the contract and where people get tripped up and stuff like that. So anyway, that's what we'll do on Thursday at 11. So in between now and then, I'm gonna go get in the car and drive to St. George, teach a class in St. George and come back.
Oh my god.
I'm teaching in San
So,
Juan.
yeah, I'm heading to St. George as soon as I'm done talking to you two. Yeah, I'm leaving to St. All right, thanks Zoe, Lindsay, good having you guys on.
Yes.
See you Thursday.